before I get to one state, I want to get to this other piece of your work, and correct me if I'm reading it wrong, but one of the things I really like is a part of me really shies away from, and I'm not drawing, look, I'm not drawing a false equivalency here. Mm-hmm. One needs to oppose the occupation, period, and the siege on Gaza and everything else. But there's a way in which the conversation about Israel-Palestine becomes very specialized, I think, in a way that robs us of understanding how it fits into a bigger supply chain and a bigger, basically just sort of Western colonial system and a bigger securitization of the world. Mm-hmm. And so, on one hand, there's, obviously, like some people in my family, which is, it's Israel and we have an identity and we can do, we just need to do what we do, which is actually some of the initial critiques I have of identity politics and certain manifestations arise from the tremendous misuse of identity politics in the defense of Israeli apartheid. Then, conversely, I think there are some people who have, it's inevitable that at times there's going to be, if not outright anti-Semitism, shades of anti-Semitism, and a conspiratorial understanding of this. Mm-hmm. But you've talked about the Israeli government and the occupation and Israelization as really, of course, in and of itself, a horrible, distinct crime, but also a forerunner, almost a horrifying infomercial of a world where Western governments are securitizing borders, where they're policing refugees, where they're detaining.
Not only Western
all governments, pardon me. Explain that more sort of security economic supply chain way of understanding the Israeli occupation and how it fits into the bigger picture.
Well, I wrote a book called War Against the People, in which I place really the Israeli, Israel over Palestine is a microcosm of the global North over the global South.
Right. That's why I was saying Western.
But we all live in a global capitalist economy.
Right.
I mean, we're all living in the same system, whether you're Western or not Western or Chinese or whatever.
Because for what it's worth, I mean, in the West, in that sense, I realize, it is sloppy because I mean, Dubai is Western.
I would talk about capitalists.
Capital,
and everybody's
that's better
in one way or another.
Capital,
in the capitalist
capital
system.
domination, and
whether it's
exploitation.
state capitalism like China or corporate capitalism like here.
Yes.
The point is that in this capitalist system, especially the neoliberal system of the last 50 years. It's closing down more and more. More and more people are excluded. 80% of humanity lives on less than $10 a day. And even, the global South is extending into the global North. You have the Occupy movement here because young children, middle-class kids of the global North are also being excluded. There's no more job security. They can't get housing. They have these huge loans. So they're being excluded. So as the system closes down all over the world and resources are being robbed by corporations, so wars today are resource wars. They're not wars of battles and tanks and ideologies and countries. They're wars against the people. Whether people in the global South that you want to rob and repress because they resist, that's counterinsurgency, or people at home, like middle-class kids or minority kids or immigrants or poor people that also resist being marginalized and impoverished. War against the people.
Ferguson, Occupy.
You can go on and on. I mean,
but just
every
fill
day.
In. Right.
So that wars today are wars against the people. They're fought by police forces and security forces. And the police forces are being militarized. And if you think about it, your militaries are being policified. They're not fighting a war in Afghanistan and Iraq and Africa and so on. They're policing.
Right.
So that all these things are coming together. And in a war against the people, the United States doesn't have the weaponry and tactics because your weapons that the Pentagon develops are geared for fighting the Soviet Union, not for fighting people in Kabul or Brooklyn.
Right.
And Europe hasn't fought colonial wars for decades. So the go-to country, that's what I'm trying to get at, for war against the people is Israel. Because Israel has been fighting a war against the Palestinian people for 125 years. It has an occupied territory that you have to look at as a resource, as a laboratory for for testing and perfecting weapons, security systems, surveillance systems, tactics of population control, technologies of repression that are exported. So the point is the Palestinians are the guinea pigs. But you in the United States, because Israel is exporting to the United States and all over the world. Israel is the sixth largest arms exporter. So in a sense, you're the end user. You're at the receiving end of the military and policing technologies that are simply perfected on the Palestinians. So it's what I call global Palestine. Right. And we have to understand, and in a sense, it's a great window into understanding how capitalism is enforced. And Israel is really in many, I'm not saying it's the only enforcer, obviously, but Israel really has the model of enforcement and the technologies for it. And even the concept of a security state that it's trying to peddle, that really finds a ready market in this country and all over the world. So Israel really delivers for you. It helps you to repress your own populations. Israel is now being sued by the Khashoggi family, yep, of the journalist that was killed in Istanbul, because the Israelis sold the eavesdropping material to the Saudi government. Right. So whether you want to repress your own people or whether you're a corporation and a corporate government that wants to repress people in general for the interests of global capitalism, Israel becomes the go-to country. So in a sense, there's a global dimension to this conflict, so-called, to the occupation that I think we should all be aware of.
Yeah, this reminds me, I keep thinking, and I'll send it to you if you haven't read it yet, but Achille Mbembe, who's a Cameroonian philosopher, wrote a piece in 2016 called The Age of Humanism is Coming to an End, I believe. And he, in a similar way, he said, basically, Gaza is the microcosm of everything that's happening right now.
That's right. And the point, that's right. And the point that I try to make is that the Gazans, again, are simply the guinea pigs. Yeah. So what I try to say to people is, you should be concerned about Palestinians because they're Palestinians that are suffering for human rights and so on. Right. But in a sense, as you're here in New York or the U.S., as your police forces and security forces are being Israelized, yeah, the Jewish Voice for Peace organization has a campaign called Deadly Exchange that's trying to document the Israeli training of American police and arming of American police. As your security forces are being Israelized, you are being Palestinianized, you the people.
Right.
And so in a sense, there's a very real connection between the people on the receiving end in Gaza and the same people on the receiving end of the same weapons and tactics in New York City.
Right. So, and also ideologically too. There's an ideological export and cross-pollination as well.
Yeah, no, certainly. I mean, Israel is very good at Hasbara, at PR, and so that's, that becomes part of, especially Hasbara of the global capitalist system is around the term security.
Yes. Right.
Because security is kind of a neutral term. Of course I want security, and of course I want my government to give it to me. So it becomes a form of self-pacification where you don't see the political interests involved in pacifying you, in getting you to conform and repressing you and so on, but you simply see it as security, and so you willingly accept it. So to the degree that Israel gets people to accept occupation as something somehow normal, and of course we're defending against occupation because the people of the Palestinians are terrorists, and you make a kind of common sense. Israel is helping, I think, the global elites to package repression as a form of neutral security that, of course, we all want.
How many people after the Snowden revelation said, hey, if you're doing nothing wrong, there's no problem?
Exactly.
Versus looking at the systemic problem of that type of surveillance.
Exactly.
You just enjoyed that Michael Brooks Show video, and you can get a lot more by subscribing to us here at the Michael Brooks Show YouTube channel. It's literally right there.